Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 32. Today I'm speaking with a guest you may already know. She's a big part of the Nature Journal community, one of the organisers of the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference, and a naturalist, artist and explorer who has been keeping field journals for around 40 years. I'm talking about Roseann Hanson. This conversation explores Roseann's work as a naturalist and nature journal teacher, her tools and techniques, and her experience in desert environments all around the world, including Australia. It made me smile to hear her laughing at my questions and how she answered them with passion and an obvious deep love of nature. Let's listen. Roseann, thank you so much for being here with me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Bethan.
I'm excited. And I always start my interviews by asking about earlier nature experiences. And I'm wondering, did you have nature in your life from the beginning, from childhood?
Oh, yes. I was really, really lucky. I grew up, my parents intentionally bought land way outside of town, which was unusual, back in the 50s and 60s. And so, yes, I grew up, we just ran amok in the desert.
Yeah.
And my parents were so lovely. The only rule was to be home before dark and to not get hurt. And if we got hurt, we had to do it by the road so my dad could find us.
That's the opposite of helicopter parenting. That's just like, you go and let nature raise you. I love it.
It is. And I think it allowed me two things, that to learn independence and to learn to be responsible and smart, but also to love nature.
That's beautiful. And so in college you studied journalism as well as ecology and evolutionary biology, and you've been keeping field journals since college, and that's amazing. And it sounds like back then it was very focused on writing and taking rigorous field notes, and then eventually, bit by bit, you started adding illustrations and sketches to your journal. And I'd love to hear you speak about that, about the evolution of your journaling practice from the beginning and the way it's changed and developed.
Yes. So, yes, I started out, my field notes journals were largely in college. Actually, before then, I actually journaled as a girl too. So I actually started when I was about 8 years old.
Wow.
But they became nature journals in college. Field notebooks, and I used the Grinnell Method, which is a scientific method that was taught to us in school. Sadly, I don't think it's taught anymore, but it's a pretty rigorous method of keeping notes. You keep prose notes, but you also keep a smaller journal when you're in the field to keep rapid notes. So you're keeping species lists, and if you're collecting things, if you're doing a biological study or what have you, and then you transfer those notes into your larger notebook, and it's pretty rigorous. And I did that for decades, and then I started slowly adding sketching. I've always been creative. I used to be I guess I still am, but I used to be an jeweler, lapidary and metalsmith, and I've always liked to just make things and be creative, and so the sketching just sort of happened. And but as I was telling someone today, it was slow going because I'm a perfectionist. The science part of me wanted it to be perfect scientific illustrations, and it actually it caused me to actually stop journaling for a while because I didn't like what I was producing. And I finally discovered John Muir Laws and his community, and the encouragement to use drawing to learn, not learning to draw. And after I let that go, it was amazing how much better I got when I stopped being strangled by perfection. Not to say I don't still try strive for accurate drawing, but I focus on the details to help me identify a bird or a plant, and not worry too much about how perfect it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you said, drawing to learn and not learning to draw, because there's a huge difference in those two things. And drawing to learn is exploration. It's diving into something. It's finding details, not because you want to represent something perfectly, but because they're bringing out the curiosity in you and the learning. I love that distinction.
Exactly. Every single time I sit down to study something, to draw it in my journal, I learn something about it, even if it's something I've looked at 100 times. And in my classes I teach, it's so much fun when I do that, because I'll pick like a tangerine leaf out of our garden, and it's the last time I did that, I learned something about tangerine leaves, and because I see them every day, but because I studied it to draw it, I learned something. So it's really cool. Yeah.
I love that. And that's one of the most wonderful joys about nature journaling, isn't it? It's finding wonder in the things you thought you knew.
Exactly. And the things we see every day that you don't need to go to Africa or South America or Australia for us to see something amazing. Of course, for you, it would be, coming to the American Southwest or something. You don't need to find amazing things. They're right in our backyards.
Yes. So you spent 20 years as a freelance writer, explorer. You wrote for magazines, you wrote books on adventure and natural history. And I've heard you speak about something you and your husband call jumping off cliffs. Saying yes to chance opportunities in life, and jumping off cliffs led you to so many amazing adventures through life. And I'd love to hear you speak about that, about saying yes to opportunities in life and where that has taken you.
That's funny that you grabbed that one. Well done. So people do often ask us, because we've led a life that I'm super happy with, and it came about because I had to let go of my early on, came from my family. My dad was an engineer and, always planning. He planned everything. He didn't do anything by chance. Didn't do anything that wasn't very carefully planned. Vacations were planned. Everything was planned. And so I married young, still married to Jonathan, 37 years.
Wow.
And I married when I was 19. Oh my gosh. First cliff. Together. It's when opportunities come up and they're scary, and they think, so, we had jobs, we were in, really just doing fine. And then we had this opportunity. This was our first cliff, to become naturalists in a wildlife refuge in the middle of nowhere, remote wilderness, caretakers and naturalists. There was no pay. It was volunteer. There's no, there was a phone. This was before the days of the internet. Actually, it was like the first few years of the internet, 1996. And we just quit everything, rented out our house, and moved into the middle of nowhere, not knowing how we were going to make a living, nothing. But we thought we just can't pass it up.
How did you make that leap? Were you full of nerves, or did it take a lot of discussion, or did you just say, yes, let's do it?
I think at that point, there was, discussion. It's like, how are we going to do this? And then it was basically, how are we not going to do this?
Yeah.
We will be so sorry. And then basically from then on out, every 4, 5, 6 years, something else would pop up. That kind of ended. And then we had a chance to go work on a guest ranch in the Chiricahua Mountains, which is an extremely famous birding area in southern Arizona. And then from there, I met people who ended up offering me a job in Africa. Again, it was like, okay, let's just do it.
Let's do this. Wow. Oh, it sounds amazing. You've had such adventures. Wow. So you were raised in Arizona, and I'd love to hear you speak about your connection with nature, and in particular with the desert ecosystem, Because I think the environment where we're raised it becomes part of us, and I imagine the desert is part of you.
Another really good insight. Yes, my husband and I actually both grew up outside of Tucson in the desert. Our families knew each other growing up, but we didn't meet until college.
Wow.
Yeah, our moms knew each other. It was kind of crazy. But yeah, so both of us, very much so. The Sonoran Desert, which is where we're from, we're actually lucky where we are is an intersection of multiple deserts. So we're at the intersection of the Sonoran Desert, the Chihuahuan Desert, also the Great Basin, the Great Plains, and several deserts all come together, the Mojave, and then grasslands, and then our Sky Islands. So we have an extremely special landscape. But deserts globally really draw us. So the places we love the most. So Australia, getting into the middle of the Red Desert in Australia was one of the highlights of our lives. We spent several years traveling in Australia with our Land Cruiser, and same with Namibia. The Atacama Desert in South America. We just love deserts. Can't wait to.
Yeah.
I think Mongolia is kind of our next, the Gobi.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that. You've already brought it up about the feeling of deserts in different places. Do they have this? What's the same and what's different? Is it the feeling of the atmosphere? I mean, I presume that the soil is different, or is it the same? I'm just interested about the comparison.
That's a good question. I think for me, it always feels like I'm home when I'm in a desert. It doesn't matter, and it could be an Arctic desert, because I felt very much at home in the high Arctic, where there's very little rainfall, and the water is captured in the tundra, so it's not. It's very much a desert. It's a functional desert, and I felt at home there. So I think it has to do with one. I'm never comfortable in a lot of trees. I love landscapes where I can see really far. It might be aridity. It's also just the form and function of the plants and wildlife are there's a lot of convergent evolution. So I recognize things. It's like, oh
yes,
that plant, well, I may not know exactly the name, but I certainly know that its function, how it lives. Same with, lizards, snakes, animals that are adapted to the desert. I just love them.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you said that about forests, because I have a dear friend who is from Israel, and she's very connected to the desert as well. And she's here in Australia, and they lived in the rainforest, and she said she felt like slightly claustrophobic.
I totally get that.
Because she's used to the expansive sky and the wideness and the openness of the desert.
Although right now I have to say we're in a deep, deep drought in this desert, and that's painful. We could use some rain. We're in a period of probably botanical regime change, and it's so drastic. So major plants are dying and being replaced by other plants.
And is this a climate change reaction?
It's hard to say. I mean, for certain, we're in climate change, yes. Droughts do happen. We have had droughts, but this one feels deep and long, and it feels systemic, like it's climate change, yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about your adventures in Australia. How did that come about?
So it was an accident. We were every year we try to go to England to visit a colleague. My husband is a writer as well, and he co-authored probably the Bible on expedition travel. It's called the Vehicle Dependent Expedition Guide with Tom Shepard, and so we distribute the books here, and so he's a dear friend. So we try to go every year for business and seeing Tom and our other friends in England. We have a lot of friends in England and Scotland. So I was looking up tickets to go to England, and I think this was January 2017. And for some reason, we don't know why, the prices were just absurd. We could usually get them really affordably, but they were like $2,500 each. And we were just like, no. And as I was looking at what do you call it? Like kayak.com. I was buying my tickets, and I got this little fare alert from Air New Zealand. It's like special $700 round trip to Sydney from Los Angeles.
Are you
And
for real?
I said to Jonathan, I was just like, hey, how do you
Let's go.
Let's go to Australia. And he said, sure. So I bought 2 tickets, totally no planning.
Oh my goodness.
I was just like, let's go in July. That sounds good. Okay.
That's hilarious.
And then we thought we were going to rent a vehicle. And that turned out to be absurdly expensive for a month. We wanted to stay a month. If you're going to go that far.
Yes.
Because we figured we'd only go once. So we ended up actually buying an older Land Cruiser. And then we loved it so much, we left it there. We made really good friends, and we went back 3 years in a row. So we saw every state.
Did you?
But we didn't, the only region we didn't explore really, really well was the far north.
Oh, there's some amazing landscapes up there.
And yeah, but that's where all the big crocodiles are.
That's right.
I was glad we didn't see them.
Yes, you're right. I'm sure you've seen much more of Australia than me. Isn't it funny that we often explore other countries before we explore our own?
It's true. We have a lot of Australian friends who we joke have actually seen more of America than we have.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in England and did a lot of exploring in New Zealand, but not so much here yet. But I'm looking forward to that.
Well, with a young family, it's really hard, so...
Yes. So I'd love to talk about your tools, because you use what you call a minimalist toolkit when you're sketching outdoors. And for those who haven't heard about your sketching tools, I wonder if you could describe your simple minimalist nature journaling kit.
Sure. So one of the things when I first was adding sketches and watercolor, which I just fell in love with watercolor, I just went overboard. Like I think all of us do, I had probably, I don't know, like 50 colors, and you just buy everything you see because it's like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. I want that one. I want that one. And I also took all the deep dives, especially with Jane Blundell, and they're an Australian, I call her the queen colorist.
Yes, she's incredible.
Amazing, and I just went in deep. And then I realized I'm a naturalist, and nature journaling for me is about recording what I'm seeing. And I was getting a bit too bogged down in being like gripped. It's called gripped. If you've ever done rock climbing, there's this thing called gripped, where if you're climbing and you don't, all of a sudden you're like,
you're paralyzed.
Can't move. Yeah, paralyzed. You're like,
okay.
I don't know what to do. And that's kind of how I felt when I got to that point in coloring, because I had too many colors and I had like 5 different brushes, and you juggle things and lose things and drop things. And so finally I just said, okay, Jane Blundell was like into triads and getting things down to a really simple system. So I started teaching myself to mix all the colors I needed with just 3 primary colors. Then learned the hard way that red is not a primary color, even though a zillion tutorials tell us you just need red, yellow, and blue. It's like, well, it doesn't actually work that great.
Yes.
So right now, what I've finally come down to is I use what I call the true primary colors. So a cyan color, which for me, I love manganese blue, which Daniel Smith now has a lovely manganese blue hue. And then I use a magenta, so quinacridone rose, and then I love a neutral yellow, a yellow that's not like going to be really, really warm or really, really too bright. So I use aureolin, which again, Daniel Smith has really refined it, and it's no longer a fugitive color.
Yes, I was going to say
that's okay. It's not super, super light fast, but it's no longer considered fugitive, which means fugitive colors used to you use them in a painting, and then if they're like hung on a wall, sometimes within even a few years the colors fade, and I think some of the turners, I think. He loved, I think he said, and I could be wrong, so this is just a vague recollection, but
yes,
I believe it was one of the lake colors, like Scarlet Lake, early on, and he loved it so much and he used it in everything, but it was so fugitive. But he didn't care because he would just
loved
sell it and he figured, oh well,
I'll be gone.
I'll be gone, so what do I care? But I'll have to look up what color that was and if it was Turner.
That's interesting.
Anyway, so that way, and then I just add a couple of other, like my little second favorite colors are an Andanthrum blue, really, really, really dark blue that can actually be used as on its own for practically the darkest dark you need. And burnt sienna, which, creates a beautiful black really quickly with the blue. So those are all I use now. And I use one brush, a travel brush, an Isabay or the Rosemary makes one that's really similar. And that's it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Sometimes I'll throw in a few extras. I'm totally in love with green leaf and blueberry colors. In fact, I've switched all to green leaf and blueberry when Jess Greenleaf came out with her primary colors. So she has a cyan, a magenta, and a yellow now that are gorgeous.
So these are handmade
watercolors, like literally. They make them by hand, and they're super hard to come by, I can't even tell you how gorgeous they are in terms of their texture and how they spread so beautifully. But
so you notice a
Daniel
big difference.
Smith's also lovely. It is that there is a big difference.
Yeah. I'm interested because I love color as well. I love chatting about color, and I'm wondering because often the color that's recommended for cyan is phthalo blue, and you like to choose manganese blue hue, and I'm interested.
The only reason is and I love phthalo blue, but it's also extremely staining. Yes. And I like to go quickly, and I sometimes do what I call a blork. Make a mistake or whatever, and then if I use the lifting colors, I can quickly get it off the page. Yes. Phthalo is, you have to be completely committed, and anything you mix with phthalo, it's there forever and ever, and it's really hard to lift. Actually, it's impossible to lift.
That's a great point. Yeah, good.
But it's gorgeous color.
It's very vibrant and bright, isn't it?
But Jess Greenleaf's cyan is as vibrant as phthalo, but it lifts. It's
liftable. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. So I took a class from another Australian, so John Lovett. He's an artist, not a he does journal, but he's not known in the nature journaling world. And I think he's not far from you. I think he's outside of Brisbane. Anyway, I took a class from him. He loves America. And he loves the phthalo colors. So he's always got phthalo green and phthalo blue. And then I just loved taking a class from John. He helped free me from the tyranny of perfection and colors. His palette is stunningly awful in terms of he leaves everything on the palette. It's this grimy, gross, and he's always just like, oh, that looks like it's great. Yeah, he just like, oh, I'll just, here's a nice brown. And people will ask, the students, like, how did you mix that? And he said, oh, I have no idea. Just pull it off the palette.
I love that. Yes. I tend to do that too. Like from yesterday's painting, it's like, oh, actually that will work quite well here, even though you don't quite know what was in it.
And that taught me to relax about color, right? It doesn't have to be. I think we get stuck on rules, and rules paralyze us sometimes. And we learned that from Tony Foster as well. If you got to listen to Tony Foster at the Wild Wonder, and I got to hear Tony speak in person in Tucson as well, and all the artists in the room were like, Tony, tell us what's in your palette. And he pulls out his little palette, which is a tiny little travel palette. And he said, I have no idea what these colors are. He says, I just go into the store and I buy what looks good. And if I like it, I use it. Yes. And if I don't, I throw it away.
Fantastic. And that's so really freeing, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah, and he does amazing work. So I love that about just learning about colors and using them is to just do what makes you happy. And
Yes.
I bet your painting gets a lot better if you just relax and do what makes you happy.
Yes. Oh, it's so fun to know about colors as well, and just
Mm-hmm.
to know a little bit of the theory, and then just to throw it out and have a base from which you can just then experiment.
I know, and I learned so much from you at your class at Wild Wonder. I had, getting the muted colors. I really enjoyed your explanation. I've never seen anyone explain it as well as you did. Using you had your primary colors, but then you also used your other favorite colors that were complementary, I think. And then I loved how you showed how you can quickly knock back a brighter color with its
Opposite on the color wheel.
And
Yeah.
I always did it just a slightly different way, but it was the same way. I just didn't know why I was doing it.
Yes.
And you explained it, and then it was like, bing, the light goes off. And
I love that.
Wow. It totally is awesome. And so, yeah, your color theories are excellent. You're much more of a colorist than I am. I call myself lazy.
Lazy.
I am.
I learned a lot from Jane Blundell as well. She's amazing, and her website is just...
Isn't it just amazing? Did you ever take any classes from her?
Yes, I did. And this, you can see the color chart behind me. This is one from Jane's watercolor class.
Yeah.
The way she explains it, like, you can have a triad, doesn't have to be this triad, it can be a muted triad, and then you get a whole nother color wheel. And the idea of making multiple color wheels from different triads is, it's really empowering.
It's really fun. I also, after learning that from Jane as well, I was like, oh, okay, you can do this with anything, really.
Yeah.
And there's no rules. But I put together a little triad of, I call them natural tints. So like a yellow ochre, and actually it's a Sleeping Beauty turquoise blue from Daniel Smith.
That's a nice name.
Oh, it's made from a real turquoise, so it's got a copper base. And the magenta, I use a green leaf and blueberry. It's a purple ochre. And
wow.
I can mix, greens and beautiful purplies and things, but they're all really muted, kind of like
really
an
earthy,
old-fashioned tint.
Yes. And then when you use a triad like that in a painting, you get such amazing color harmony. Everything's working
exactly,
with itself. Oh, so fun. Well, while we're talking about this, I'd love to hear, and I know that my listeners would love to hear, you talk about what you call feral watercolors. So you have a workshop where you teach people how to create paint from rocks and soil, and I'd love to hear all about this.
Oh, fun. Yes, that's an obsession that I don't think it'll be over for a long time. So it started in Australia.
Did you?
It did. It started there when we were traveling through traditional lands, and there was a sign. So this was outside Oodnadatta, on the Oodnadatta Trek in the Red Desert. And there's a sign that said, heritage area, ancient ochre site. And, there was a sign, and you could park and overlook this enormous canyon. And it had yellow ochres, red ochres, purple ochres, all hues in between. Of course, you don't collect anything, but there was a lot of information about how the traditional people of Australia use ochres in painting skins early on, rocks, their bodies, everything that they could decorate. And of course, still used today for art and ceremony. So coming back home, I thought, I'm going to learn more about making my own, gathering pigments, because I know rocks around here, there's loads of red ochres around here, or red, I should call them iron oxides.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I just kind of dived deep into it. North of me is a landscape called the Painted Desert. And
Wow.
and if you look on Google Earth, Google the Painted Desert, North America, but you have to be in the satellite view. You'll see it's an amazing landscape of oxide earth in purples and yellows and reds. So I learned where I could collect legally, mostly roadside cuts, and learned how to do my own paint. So there's a lot of misinformation on the internet, haha, surprise, about how to grind pigments, how to make pigments, how to make paint. So it's a lot of trial and error. And so now I'm teaching classes on it because it's really fun to do. I've actually got one coming up April 24th online. So
Fantastic.
Anyone can join. Yeah. It's through the Natural History Institute that I partner with sometimes. But yeah, so, and sadly, I don't know if I could get them to Australia, but in fact, we probably wouldn't want to do that. If you're in North America, I'd mail you a kit of a pigment and the binder, but we wouldn't mail it to Australia because that would be mailing soil to
Yes,
another
Australia
place,
has very strict laws.
Oh, and they should,
it.
and you would never, ever want to transport soil like that. So, however, it's really fun, and so I do a lot of place-based soil collecting and experimenting. I've used magnetite from a mountain range in the northern Mexico to do some sketching of that range. It's really fun.
So cool. There's so much in that. Firstly, I want to say I love how you are respectful of the land and its people and being responsible about where you collect and within the laws and the limits. And secondly, I love what you said about creating place-based art and journal entries because, if you're gathering the soil and you're painting the landscape with the landscape, that's a really powerful thing, isn't it? You're connected in this really amazing cycle.
I really, really delve deep into that. I love that. And that's why I wanted to do it. And I just can't seem to stop now. And now when I go places, I'm always looking at soil for potential pigment. And I learned a lot about it. One thing I would point out to people to be very careful though, because just because pigments are natural doesn't mean they are safe. Mm-hmm. So you have to be quite careful. If you were in the American Southwest and you found some coppery oxides, turquoises and stuff, you wouldn't process those on your own because ingesting them would be super bad for you.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, they aerosolize. And so I learned a lot.
Yes.
So I do teach how to be safe, smart, about how you do it and how to be legal and respectful. The nice thing is you only need a tiny, tiny bit to make a lot of pigments. So like literally a little stone the size of, say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an Australian coin.
Yeah. $2 coin.
Yeah. So, or even smaller than that, actually.
Okay.
I think. Say couple of centimeters across.
Wow.
In diameter, will grind up and make you a nice little half pan paint.
Wow. And do you know how they last on the page? Like, do they change over time?
Question.
Do they seep through the page? We'll find out, I guess.
I know. I haven't. I think oxides would not fade very much, but other pigments might. I haven't done any light fast tests.
I think in a sketchbook it's different because it's not accessing the light as much.
Correct. Yeah, that's true. And if you use a good binder, it's going to stay on the page.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, so fun.
It's so much fun. I highly recommend it.
It reminds me of a teacher I had an online sketching course, and he was saying wherever he is, he collects water for his watercolours. So if he's at the beach, he'll just scoop a little bit of seawater, or if he's by a creek, he'll scoop some water from the creek.
I love that.
Yeah, it connects you in this sort of deeper way, doesn't it?
It does, and that would be fun to do because, of course, the salt water will
change,
react differently with the paint, and yeah, you have to be really brave to do that, don't you? Because, it's like, it might look awful.
Yes.
But as long as you just, you put that in that's part of the experience, isn't it?
Absolutely. Again, yeah, it's about freeing up, letting go. This is a recurring theme in all my conversations about nature journaling, is how to do that, how to let go, how to do it for you, how to do it for the process, not the product, and all those good things that we talk about.
Do you find that? So I find that, you tell me if you found this, I find kids are so much better about just jumping in, and they're not worried about being judged yet.
Yes.
But it's around junior high school, where they start to worry about being judged.
Yes, I think it's even earlier than that. I think around 8 or 9.
That's too bad.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a point where the inner critic comes to life, and it's such a shame. But yeah.
It's very hard to let go of that critic, and I had to. I'm a perfectionist.
How did you do it? What were your strategies for letting that go?
That's a good question, because I am asked that a lot, and I see people struggling a lot. So it's, I think, starting small in the way of, okay, I noticed I was biting off too much initially. Like, I would choose to sketch something that was just way out of my ability to even finish. And so starting smaller, picking something that doesn't fly away. So that's maybe why I'm really much better. I can really get into doing plants. I love botanical illustration, but it's because they don't fly away. But I'm doing birds now too, but they're hard.
Yes.
But yeah, so doing that small, forcing myself to go sketch in public where people will watch me.
That the first time I did that,
Isn't
my gosh, I was so intimidated, and and then someone comes before you've even like put down proper marks, and then you're thinking, they're thinking blah blah. It's awful.
So that was the biggest thing, is I would go to the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum, where it's a wonderful living zoo where the animals are in natural enclosures and they're not in barred cages and stuff. So it's quite lovely. It's a lot like the Taronga Zoo. And yes, I would just sit and then make myself just do it. And people would start treating me like I was one of the exhibits. And they would just
they'd stand behind you.
They'd come up behind me and look over my shoulder. And of course, you know what? Every time, even when it was really awful, people would say, "Oh my God, that's so beautiful." And I think, okay, you know what? Just absorb that. That is beautiful.
Great.
And then I let those people teach me to let go in a way. And then people would take selfies with me. It was hilarious. It was like, I know, it was quite hilarious. And then, so I just embraced it. I was like, okay.
That's lovely, because we as a species, evolution has carved us out so that we are designed to hold on to the negative things because it's a survival thing. If you've got your senses out for danger, then you're going to survive longer. But it's not a very nice trait to have in the modern world.
What a great observation. That is a really good observation. You're a good naturalist.
So we're sort of physically designed to hook onto the negative, and we have to let the positive in a very conscious way. And it sounds like you've done that with the...
But it took me, yes, it had to be conscious. I had to allow it. And you know what you have to do? You have to stop yourself from saying, "Oh, no, this is awful." Like, "Oh, no, this will be so much better tomorrow after I've spent 27 hours on it." You really do have to not say that. You have to accept the compliment and smile, and then it becomes true.
I love that so much. I can just imagine you there and people are looking over your shoulder.
Oh, you should see some of my sketches too, because when I'm nervous, when I don't, and I think people are watching me, my sketching is really like, oh my gosh, like it doesn't even look remotely like what I intended. And I was pushing myself. I was trying to sketch live coyotes. That's like a coyote is like your dingo. and things that were moving, and but so that's what I would recommend people
My
do
goodness.
to help get over that. And I know how hard that is, but we really should. Also, sharing work with others in a venue like, whether Instagram or
Mm-hmm.
Facebook and the Nature Journaling Club, sharing with colleagues and others is I don't think you can grow much until you do that honestly, and get the feedback. And one of the things I did recently, well, it was about 5 months ago, maybe 6 months. A lot of my beginning students were telling me, well, no, I can't post on the Nature Journal Club because there's so many amazing artists and I'm so horrible. So we started a little tiny private group, just for beginners. And so people who've gotten my book or taken my classes, they come and join there, and then people are much more willing to post, their stick figures and their what they think are their failures, and they get tons of great advice and feedback from other beginners. So we just ask that people apply to the group and promise that they're beginners and not professional artists who just want to show off their work, which is fine, which is great, but putting everybody together
can be intimidating.
Really hard.
Yes. So good. So I love that you're nurturing the beginners in a really safe way.
I love teaching. I teach I'm the art and science coordinator at the Desert Laboratory on Tumamoc Hill, which is North America's our oldest field station, and I teach through that as well. And
wow.
Yeah, I really love introducing people to the joys of nature journaling. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So speaking about that, we talked a little about how your journals had changed through time, adding sketching as time went on, but there's another more recent development that's happened, which is that you're now evolving to your teaching being a lot online because of the pandemic. And
you caught me.
No, what I heard you speak about a point in time when you said, online learning, that's not for me, And
actually, no, it was worse than that.
Okay, tell me.
It was I know exactly when it was. I was in a staff meeting for the Desert Laboratory, and it was February 2020. You know where this is going, don't you? And
right before the pandemic.
Someone said, "Oh, we need to develop online classes. Everyone's doing it." And I said, "No. This is about nature. We have to teach in nature. We don't teach nature online. I'm sorry. I can't do that."
So funny. And then 1 month later, bam.
1 month later, we had to cancel every single class. And within 5 months, I had done a complete pivot, and the most wonderful thing happened. I love it. I've taught over 1,500 people online now, and from all over the world. So we'll have, instead of 15 people in a class, I've had 150.
Wow.
From all over the world. So people get to meet and see other people, other experiences, and they see that we're not so isolated.
Yes. And that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And I think we won't stop. At the Desert Laboratory on Tumamoc Hill, we've decided to move forward with hybrid teaching. So from now on out, all of our classes will be both online and in person. So we're working out how to do the filming and let people come in on Zoom remotely.
Wow.
I know.
Fantastic.
It
oh,
is.
Wow.
So yeah, shut my mouth.
That's wonderful. But you have sort of pioneered this new style of online class, which is it's the nature journaling field trip. And you have taken people to places all across the world through these online field trips. And I'd love for you to talk about this sort of new genre of teaching.
I took it and ran with it, but I really have to say, it was Ryan Pedersen at Stanford University. He and I met at the first Wild Wonder. Ryan and I had a connection. He came to an adventure travel event I used to own called Uberland Expo, for people who love to get out exploring in their four-wheel drive vehicles and their motorcycles and exploring the world. And anyway, so Ryan, we knew each other, and it was like, oh hey, how are you? And I didn't know he was the field coordinator for the Stanford Earth Sciences program, meaning he set up all the field trips, right? So, and he's a nature journaler, a field notes guy. And so we were like, oh my gosh, I had no idea we had that in common too. And then when the pandemic hit, we were commiserating about, oh my gosh, all of our fieldwork's dead, all of our classes, everything. And he and I collaborated on, we just challenged ourselves. It was just like, okay, let's do this. And so he introduced me to this 360-degree view technology. We used that for our first field trip together. We co-authored, it was in England, where we went as a geology field trip. And then Ryan started doing that for Stanford, and I pivoted and did mine for my work. And, we taught each other how to do a lot of fun things. So yes, now I develop these really cool virtual field trips, and I'm just completing one for the Santa Cruz River here in Tucson. We're going to be giving a class on, I'm doing a math in nature series it's really cool. So we're doing fluid dynamics, which is river, literally kind of, you can use mathematics to predict where rivers will meander and travel over time. It's actually, you can use geometry and these equations to predict what rivers will do. It's really quite interesting.
That's a whole nother level, isn't it? A whole nother area.
And so I'm developing a field trip, though, to take online viewers down to the river. And then we can zoom in and see video and pictures and sounds. And it's really fun. I love it.
Oh, wow. And I love that not only does this connect people from distant places on Earth, but you mentioned also that people have said to you, you've made these places accessible to me because I have a disability, or for other reasons that these places aren't accessible.
Yes, I didn't even think of that when the pandemic hit and we started pivoting the classes that way. Yes, I've gotten dozen or so correspondence from people who said, wow, I'm disabled. I can't hike anymore, but you took me, up this mountainside, and I could draw it, and it was amazing, and they loved it. Or people who, honestly, it's very expensive to travel, especially out of North America or out of Australia. To get anywhere from our continents is quite expensive unless we drive to Mexico or Canada. But so getting to travel without, also the carbon footprint, the fact that I can have 150 people in a class and we haven't gotten on an airplane and despoiled the planet that way.
Yes, there's so many positives, and it's the pandemic has just been so shocking and awful in so many ways, and yet there's these little points of light, isn't there? And
it's yes, and that's a really nice way to put it. That it really is.
So you've written many books in your life, but you've written one specifically about nature journaling, and it's called Nature Journaling for a Wildlife. Can you tell the listeners about what they'll find inside your beautiful book?
So it's a unique book, and I am a writer, like you said, so it was quite natural for me to kind of have this idea. Like, I struggled a lot with the process of figuring out how to nature journal. If I had, thinking back, if I had never done it, obviously I had a field journal, but adding sketches and doing it for people, introducing it to people who've never done anything like this, and particularly in the times where being meditative and taking care of yourself is also very important. So I love John Muir Law's book, The Law's Guide to Nature Drawing and Journaling. but it took me like 3 years to work through it. It's so massive. So my book is actually, it's like kind of what you would use to get started and move up into Jack's book.
Mm-hmm.
And because I did it as an 8-week class, so it's literally walks you through. So like, here's what you're going to work on this week. Metadata. Why do you do metadata? And moving on. What are the other types of data? Numerical words, other ways to express nature data, and so on. And I actually even have, like, at the end of each session is check-ins, like, okay, have you done this? Your homework for the week was this, so have you done that? So you can use it to make yourself kind of get going.
Mm-mm.
And then it includes high quality watercolor paper. It's a spiral bound. So you get a journal and the teaching all in one, and it includes little pullouts, viewing grids and bookmarks and things. So it's quite unique, which is why I haven't been able to get it into the Australian market, unfortunately.
I know, Roseann. I wanted to buy a copy.
I know, the biggest, my only, there's a distributor there, it's kind of your Amazon. I can't remember the name of your big bookseller. Fabulous, but shipping, 500 books to Australia, it would be, it's insane. I cannot find an affordable shipping.
Yes.
So
we'll have to.
I'm still working on that.
So I'll leave a link to your book in the show notes for this episode, because I think it's a really important thing to get into the hands of nature journalists of all different levels, beginners, but also experienced. And I know that there's one, the Boreal Nature Journal Club in Alaska is working through your book all together, which is really
talking
fun.
with Kim and them. They're fabulous. Yeah. I'm so happy that folks can use it. And there's some student classes. There was 300 students in Boston who I gave the teachers access to the book digitally free, because they had 300 students working through the book as their science art project.
That's huge.
I worked with them on it, and it was one of the most special things I've done, because they gave me a special program at the end, and watching what the kids, how they observed nature. And a lot of these were kids in Boston who, nature for them is the tree planted on the sidewalk. They don't have access or the money to go to fancy, beautiful forests. And I loved what they come up with. Loved it.
That's
loved
wonderful. It. Yeah, how gratifying to you to see that it come alive in that way.
Oh, that was so special. So, and I've done that with a few other groups too. So.
Roseann, it's been absolutely amazing to talk to you, to hear your stories and to go into the background of everything and the details. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it was such an honor. This is so exciting to be on. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Roseann. She has such a depth of experience and a really lovely way of expressing her thoughts about nature and creativity. If you're listening to this when the podcast is first aired and you'd like the chance to be part of Roseann's class, Feral Watercolour, Making Paint from Your Own Found Pigments, you can find a link to that in the show notes of this episode. The class is happening on Saturday, April 24th, 2021 at 9:30 a.m. Pacific Time. Roseann is also one of the organisers of the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference, which is happening during June 23rd to 27th, 2021. That's a lot of 20s. The conference brings together teachers and speakers, and everyone has a passion for nature and nature journaling, and they offer classes on a huge range of topics to help you level up your nature journaling skills and have heaps of fun exploring different media and techniques. There'll be a mixture of classes, panel discussions and lectures, as well as poetry, nature journaling challenges, and chances to socialize and share journal pages. You can check out the link in the show notes for this episode to find out more about that. I wanted to also let you know that there are 2 ways you can support this podcast if you've been enjoying the episodes. The first way is by going to patreon.com/journalingwithnature and pledging a donation there. You can offer as little as $1 per month. The donation amount is totally up to you. And your support there helps to keep this project sustainable and helps me continue to bring episodes to you each week. The second way to support this podcast is by giving a 5-star rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. This helps new listeners find us and brings nature journaling to more people. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.